All right, good afternoon, everyone. Baker Fairburn Hockey Show is live here on November 29th, Black Friday edition of the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show, episode 50. Matthew Fairburn of the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show. This is turning out to be one of the longer relationships of my entire life, so congratulations to you. As the folks trickle in here on this matinee game day, we'll get the formalities, as always, out of the way. Please like this video on your way in if you could, and subscribe to the Sabres Prospects YouTube channel. You can find the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And as always, if you could, please leave a 5-star review. If you've already done it, leave another. So the Sabres have completed their 10-game mini season that we talked about leading up to Thanksgiving, and the road's about to get tougher. But they did a pretty good job on that 10-game stretch leading up to Turkey Day. They went 7-3. So now they sit at 11-10-1 for 23 points and a +3 goal differential coming into today's game against Vancouver. So if you look at the standings, which are using the point totals, Buffalo is out of the playoffs right now. But technically, this show, anyways, we choose to look at points percentage, and that would put the Sabres in the final wild card spot coming out of Thanksgiving, because Boston right now is in third place in the Atlantic Division, but they have played 2 more games than Buffalo and 3 more than Tampa. So actually Buffalo's been doing a better job than the Bruins have in terms of getting points in their games that they've played thus far. So that puts them in the final wildcard spot if you look at it that way. But nice round number, Matthew, 60 games left to play in the regular season. And this week looks a little bit challenging, starting with today's game. Ironically, this might be one of the easier games that they play in these next 4, if you think about it, just looking at what the Canucks have been up against. But Vancouver, just let's tee it up real quick with them. You know, they come in 11-7-3. They're holding down the final wildcard spot out west right now. Pretty good road team. They've been getting work done on the road. They're 8-2 thus far on the road. So another strong road team, kind of like the same story that we were looking at with Minnesota coming in on Wednesday. They were doing a really good job on the road as well. But the Canucks are playing their 3rd game in 4 days, and kind of an interesting development for them Wednesday in Pittsburgh. They've kind of struggled on defense all year, and they're even more depleted now with Philip Hronek. They lost him to injury on Wednesday as well. So good opportunity today for a Buffalo squad to, own their share of expected goals at 5-on-5, get better quality shot attempts. But want to pass it over to you, Matthew, and just kind of get your take on where the Sabres are at as the next 60 games. Obviously, that's going to tell the story about this team, but you can't look too far ahead. Where do you think this team's at coming out of Thanksgiving?
This is as good a spot as you could have hoped that they would be in, given where they were 10 games ago, a month ago or so, when they started 3-7-1, and before that started 0-3. This is a nice little rebound, and they are right there in the mix at this point for one of those wild card spots. Theoretically in the mix for a division spot. I think Tampa, Florida have kind of left the door open. Toronto has been crazy banged up in the first part of the season, but still has built a nice lead in the Atlantic Division. But the Sabres are proving, I think, to be the team we mostly expected them to be. When we got together before the season and went through the possibility of whether this team could make the playoffs and this drought, we knew goaltending would be big, right? And they're starting to get it from Ukko Pekka-Luukkonen. Another fantastic game from him on Wednesday. It went to waste in a 1-0 loss to the Wild because Gustafsson was just a little bit better. But the only goal Luukkonen allowed was on a 4-on-1 to Kirill Kaprizov, a contender for the Hart Trophy. So not a bad night for Luukkonen. He's been on fire really every game other than that game that he was playing through injury. So they're getting the goaltending. They are an inconsistent offensive team. They have not put it all together offensively. Part of that has been Tage Thompson being out of the lineup. I think they're imperfect defensively, but right around the middle of the league. And so when you're an average defensive team and you're getting great goaltending, you're just waiting for that scoring to click. They're starting to play better on special teams. I'm expecting this to be a mushy middle team for the duration of the NHL calendar as they try to, fight their way into a playoff spot. It is wide open right now. I think Toronto and Florida are really strong bets in the Atlantic. Tampa increasingly looks like a stronger bet the more the season goes on, but they are still hanging around in the wild card third spot in the division, kind of area. And Boston has looked vulnerable. So if there is a year to be a team that can grind away points and get to the playoffs in the Eastern Conference, this feels like there's a pretty strong opening for the Sabres team.
Yeah, you mentioned special teams coming around. The Sabres in the month of November, I have them at 25% on the power play this month. So that's a little bit better than how they started. But at 5-on-5, this is a team that still needs more, second and third efforts from the forwards. I think that's going to be critical today, especially, like I mentioned with Vancouver, a little bit banged up on D. You need those forwards to win more offensive zone battles. There's a couple guys that have been doing a good job of it, but sustaining more pressure, getting more, those second efforts and third efforts will lead to more improved shot quality, which will get you second opportunities, and rebound opportunities in theory. But, one of those wingers who's been doing a good job, by the way, I was looking at just some numbers while I was waiting for you to hop in here. Benson's been really good in that regard. I think in his down low play, his second efforts have been really good. Plus 2,500 today for first goal scorer, plus 400 anytime goal scorer. Kind of like that. I like Benson and Zucker today as potential goal scorers, but I digress. I think that when you're looking at this team, I think, the shot quality is going to continue to be the question mark. If they can, get a little more fortitude and get into the net and winning more battles and just getting a little more ugly with how they try to attack the net, they could be one of those teams that maybe gains a little separation in a year that, right now, a quarter of the way into the season, it's hard to say, aside from the top clubs that you already mentioned, who really wants it? Who really wants to be a playoff team this year? And there's a lot of a runway left in this season, but to your point, Buffalo's right there in it. But on the forwards, just going back to the most recent game, I guess, what did you see for them to build off of? Kind of probably what I just said, right? I think they just have to kind of keep crashing, maybe get some ugly ones. I'm still not satisfied there. And I know we're going to kind of get into maybe some particular players that are going to be keys, moving forward to getting it done. But you're with me, I'm sure, on that.
Yeah, that's been sort of one of the calling cards, the themes of the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show through 50 episodes is getting to the net, right? It's been an ongoing issue for this team and is one that they have not solved. And we have brought up the idea recently that there may be personnel reasons for that, right? When you build a big enough sample size, you start to understand who these players are and you wonder how many of them have that in their game, right? We've seen it with Zucker. We've seen it with Benson. We haven't consistently seen it with a lot of other players. So a couple of numbers that stand out while we're on that topic, because you mentioned second chances, right? So on Wednesday night, they had 87 shot attempts. 39 of those went on net, which I'm not a math major, but that leaves a lot of shot attempts that did not get on net. 32 of them were blocked by the Wild, which was one of, I think, 4 times in franchise history they've had more than 30 blocks. So a crazy number, but we've seen a few times this year some ridiculous shot block numbers against the Sabres. And your first instinct goes to, man, that team really wanted it, which I think is true of some of these teams that block shots that way. But the Sabres are an easy team to block shots against because of their shot selection. They're shooting from far away. I think their average shot distance, and this is shots that got on goal, was like 37 feet on Wednesday night. And that, I think, how often they're getting shots blocked, how often they're missing the net. They're 5th in the NHL in missed shots right now. So it's an ongoing issue, is not just not getting to the net, but the shot selection in general, shooting from too far away and not hitting the net, they work hand in hand. You need to get better shots to, you can win the shot attempt game every single night, but you need quality too. And some of that is in getting to the net. Rebound shots for, according to Money Puck, the Sabres are third from the bottom in the NHL, but they're tied for the league lead in rebound goals for. So that when they get there, good things are happening. They just need to seemingly be reminded of this repeatedly. And the last number I'll share relates to Jack Quinn, who had a season high 6 shots on net on Wednesday night and still does not have a goal against the goalie this season. He's got 1 goal and it was an empty netter. But when I went through the play-by-play data on Wednesday night, the closest shot he had to the net was 23 feet. And his average shot distance was more than 30 feet from the net. So, again, you can fire him from all over the place, but it's the quality that really counts. And so that's what I'm looking for if Jack Quinn is going to break through. And he feels kind of symbolic of the entire team in this regard. If he's going to break through, if he's going to give them that secondary scoring, it's going to require getting to more dangerous ice more often. Maybe getting some ugly ones, because Jack Quinn isn't exactly known for the ugly ones. But if you want to get back on the board, sometimes that's a good way to do it.
Yeah, it's almost like Quinn's defaulting back to, relying primarily on his shot like he was able to do in junior. He was a guy that got to the net, though, and competed. That was part of the appeal. It wasn't just the goal totals that he had when he was up there in the O playing with Rossi and those guys. But I think, and ironically, too, he's one of the Sabres shooters that's really good at changing his release angle. He almost does it like it's his reflex every time he shoots the puck. He's trying to, the work from that cone drill, you skate up and they put a cone in front of you. You got to change how you're going to get around the cone to get the shot on net. He's really good at it. So now it's just, keep your feet moving, maybe try and not hold it a little longer, but use that shot, use that instinct, use that change in release angle to improve, fire from a closer distance. I think he's close. He had a good game. I think playing with Kulich could probably help him more. Are we expecting, by the way, the lines to remain the same for this game? I know that Lindy didn't speak and there wasn't, much availability today. Is that the expectation that the lines will remain unchanged? Do you have a read on that as it relates particularly to that Kulich combo there with Quinn and Zucker?
I'm thinking it will be the same group, provided, there's no surprise injuries or anything like that. One thing that Lindy Ruff mentioned that I think is a smart point with regards to Kulich and Quinn is that Quinn is getting more looks because Kulich is left-handed. That's something that might have been holding the Cousins-Quinn group back, which is kind of weird because it was never an issue, in the last couple of seasons, but it could just be something as simple as teams getting, more video on a line and finding some tendencies that they were taking away on Cousins and Quinn. But pairing them up with a lefty seems like it's helped, get them at least more looks, better looks. That kind of remains to be seen, like I mentioned, but man, he could use one. I thought Kulich played well again on Wednesday night, while we're on that topic. Started to win some draws late in the game. The fact that he was at center again, as we talked about leading into that game, felt significant, and it opened some things up throughout the rest of the lineup. It allows McLeod to play down, creates a little bit more competition for that 13th spot as Aubé-Kubel was out of the lineup. So it's I don't see a major reason to shake things up given how things went on Wednesday. They created a decent amount of offense. It's just a matter of some small tweaks and some better bounces, frankly, because they had a few that looked like they could have gone in. If, they had Paterka miss right at the doorstep. I think it ricocheted off a Wild player when he was looking at an open net. Power missed the net twice. Tuch missed the net late, so they were sniffing, but I would expect, mostly the same group we'll see in about 25 minutes when they take the ice for warm-ups.
So again, everyone, thanks for hopping in today. It's going to be a quick show. with the 3:00 puck drop, and we want to get Matthew in position for warm up so he can answer some of these questions that I'm asking him more confidently. And so it is episode 50 of the Big Fairburn Hockey Show today. If you could please, again, like this video. Matthew, I want to stay in the kind of present for a second before kind of stepping out and into a little bit of a big picture. We saw Rasmus Dahlin on the ice, I believe it was yesterday, right? And he left the ice due to maintenance. What was the story there? Because I was kind of away from hockey a little bit yesterday, and I think you're a little closer to the situation. At least you better be closer than I've been.
Yeah, I was down. I was not down at the rink yesterday, but watching back Lindy's availability, he left it a little bit vague, but it sounds like it was semi-maintenance related. And with no morning skate today, we don't get a true hint of what Dahlin's status will be, but I would suspect that Dahlin is going to be semi-maintenance related, a lot throughout the season. He's logging a ton of minutes, as he always does, and not major cause for concern. We'll see what happens. It is a quick turnaround from, yesterday to this afternoon game. Again, another one that 25 minutes we'll kind of see the real story on where he's at. It didn't sound like there was much in the way of concrete information coming out of yesterday.
Okay. Having a little trouble with your audio today. I don't know if your mic's all the way functioning, but if it is, may just need to bring it up a little closer.
I think it twisted a little bit. This might be
okay,
better.
There you go. Perfect. Much better. Much better. Okay, so 22 games in. And like I said, a lot of hockey left to play. Let's just get some kind of bigger picture thoughts, I guess, at where this team's at coming out of Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is that benchmark that we've talked about. The Sabres are in a pretty good position here. Tough stretch of games coming up, but when we look at, and we'll get to that, when you look at particular players, though, do you have a game puck for the first 22 games of the season that there's a guy that you want to give it to? I have an idea who I would. I mean, there's a couple candidates. There's not as many candidates as I think you would like. I think there's more candidates to talk about on the other side. Who needs to pick it up? But let's start with the actual game puck for the Sabres for Matthew Fairburn for the first 22 games of the season.
To your point, I think it's not so much that we haven't seen good play from these individuals, but it's been a lot of guys running hot and cold. And I think Tage Thompson would be the obvious pick, but he just missed a chunk of time. And so this could just be recency bias on my part, but I'm going with Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen because I think without the goaltending they've got from Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, we might be telling a different story about this team at Thanksgiving. They might be closer to where Ottawa is than where they are right now. And that's a significant difference at this point in the calendar. We saw last year the way he was able to keep them afloat when they weren't playing their best. And we've seen it quite a bit this year. This is a guy that I think at his position right there, Tage Thompson's obviously had a fantastic start to the year, especially prior to the injuries. But this, when you level set it based on expectations and the pressure Luukkonen was under to follow up the second half of last year, follow up that new contract, I've really liked where his game is at and, where he's trending, especially considering for a while they didn't really have a consistent number two to turn to. And you can still wonder if they do, depending on if Reimer can be that guy. But they've had to lean on him for a lot of games. He's had to keep his body and his mind fresh, and he's been rock solid. I mean, the latest numbers on him are he is at a 245 goals against average and a 914 save percentage, which
it's 11th and 12th in the league, I think, respectively, or 12th and 11th. I think he's 11th save percentage.
Sprinkle in a slow-ish start, at least the first few games maybe weren't, his best, and then a tough one where he's playing through injury that skewed his numbers a little bit. Yeah. And in a league where 900 save percentage is really good, 914, like you said, flirting with top 10 at his position. They need that. They need top 10 to 13 goaltending to make this work, and they're getting it.
I'm with you on Luukkonen. He was also my first quarter game puck for the Sabres. I think it's at, 7.1 goal saved above expected, which is kind of the number for me. because that tells me that he's playing at a similar level to what he did at the second half of last season. The other guy that I looked at, though, I think was Tuch. And Tuch's a guy that I think some Sabres fans think I'm not in love with as a player. I like him plenty. I just didn't it was the captaincy conversation that we had. I think I still hear about it every now and then. Oh, you don't like Tuch? No, I think Tuch's an excellent hockey player. Playing a ton of minutes, really limiting his giveaways this year, the shorthanded goals. If you can get just a more consistent, I want every night Alex Tuch. I think there's still moments. Maybe it's because he's playing so many damn minutes, but ultimately, though, it is Luukkonen, because I think it's also relative, and you kind of covered this already. Who's the other option if you're not getting it from Luukkonen? We saw one game from James Reimer right now. They gave James Reimer away. They brought it back. You've seen one game. Hey, we might see Rime time tomorrow, right, to keep Luukkonen rested for the Colorado game on Tuesday, the Winnipeg game on Thursday. That's how important Luukkonen is. So I think it is Luukkonen for me.
Tuch's a good shout, though. Tuch is definitely a good shout, because he is leading the team in individual expected goals at 5-on-5. He is, you mentioned the shorthanded goals. I mentioned this in a column last weekend, but I think he is building a quiet Selke case right now with the turnovers he's creating, the way he's killing penalties, and he's got the points to go along with it. I think he is still, Wednesday might have messed this up, but he's right around a point a game at this point. And
21 through 22. Yeah.
21 through 22. So what I've liked about Tuch, and you mentioned the game, wanting to see it every single night. I think the high minutes and I think the wear and tear on his body probably contributes to some of that. It's less, he's saving himself in moments of games, maybe at times, but he's quietly just playing. He had that minor injury before the West Coast trip, missed a practice. You never know exactly what these guys are dealing with from an injury perspective, but you can almost count on Tuch fighting something most of the time, and hasn't missed time, hasn't, seen his level of play drop off dramatically. Even his B game, I think, has been solid. I'm sure everybody who watches him closely night to night, like we do, like a lot of people in the chat, they see those moments that we're talking about. But regardless, still close to a point per game. And he's played, a quarter of this season without his line mate, Tage Thompson, who makes a lot of that magic happen. So a different kind of leadership from Tuch than we're used to seeing. I think he got here and was that front-facing personality. The fan base fell in love with him very quickly. And there's a business-like approach to Tuch this season that I think is showing up in his numbers, and he is playing really, really good hockey and helping this team through some of the injuries that they've dealt with.
Playing over 20 minutes a night, leading the Sabres in assists without for a spell, the leading goal man, at least, the guy that's going to definitely, he is leading the Sabres in goals right now, but he's at the end of the season, he's going to be the guy by a wide margin. It looks like Tage Thompson. But no, the other thing too, with Tuch, and you kind of mentioned it, it was this time last year that we were talking about managing the tread on the tire. He went through a spell of games. I think it was like late November, and I have to go back and look. I don't have it in front of me, but like late November, early December. It was right before you took your break last year, and we were talking about Tuch just playing too many minutes, and I think he missed a couple of games, I want to say, in early December last year. I'd have to go back and look, but it's kind of that time of the year where you got to start managing Tuch, right? He's playing great, and maybe you can get more out of him night to night, or maybe be not as reliant as you've been if some of these other guys that need to pick it up can get going. So let's shift to that. Who is we talked about the game puck. We're both on board with UPL. Shout out to Tuch, maybe some of the other guys. Who do you need to see more from? Who needs to pick it up here after the first quarter of the season?
I think Jack Quinn is almost like the easy answer here, right? One goal from Jack Quinn when a lot of us were predicted him to hover around 30. He is well off that pace at the moment. But because we kind of covered Quinn, and we've covered Quinn repeatedly, right? We don't need to go too deep into the point, but look, this is a guy that he's supposed to be carrying some of that secondary scoring, and they're getting very little of it. He's getting power play time. He's getting all that. So that's one guy that certainly stands out. Beyond Quinn, I'm still looking in the direction of Dylan Cousins. Even though the game is trending in the right direction, he's doing a lot of the little things that you'd like to see. Playing well defensively, had a tough matchup against the Kaprizov line on Wednesday night, held his own at times. Still a guy that he needs to be a $7 million center, right? He's of the age, of the contract, of the experience level that he got his down year last year. It's got to be out of the way. You're waiting for that hot streak. And I think the biggest problem on this team right now is a lack of secondary scoring. Is that when Tage Thompson's not going, where does the offense come from? We saw when he was out, they were averaging under 3 goals a game. They were getting some greasy ones, right? Zucker was chipping in, and Dahlin got hot for a stretch, but Tuch with the shorthanded goals and finding different ways to get goals. But if they could get a consistent presence in their middle six, from a scoring standpoint, it feels like it should start with Cousins. And maybe that's just because he's a little bit older, and he's already had his contract here for a little while compared to Quinn, who is coming off an injury-riddled season, doesn't have nearly as much game experience as Cousins does. I'm putting more of the onus on him to be that guy that, carries that middle six, from an offensive standpoint.
So my smart-ass answer to this question is everyone. Everyone needs to pick it up. UPL, Tuch, all the way down. Rasmus Dahlin. Hey, I need more timely discipline from Rasmus Dahlin. We haven't really talked about some of the penalties that he's taken. But my guy was Cousins, ultimately, if I had to pick one. I know he had 3 goals and an assist in the 10-game mini season that we talked about, but you need a lot more. He's got 4 goals, 4 assists on the year. And even if, so he needs more production. It's not just about the salary. It's about his role in the lineup, the fact that he's getting power play time. He plays big minutes. If he's not going to get the production, I still need him to win more draws. I need him to block more shots. I need him to hit more bodies, generate more takeaways, limit his giveaways. I need the whole deal to improve with Dylan Cousins. But reality is that the Sabres, looking where they're at right now in this murky Eastern Conference, I need everybody to pick it up. And I know it's kind of a smart ass answer, but it's like, why single out one guy? You just said that secondary scoring is an issue. There's a lot of guys that can provide secondary scoring on this team, but certainly Cousins spearheads that. And yeah, I'm not going to sit here. We don't need to beat up Jack Quinn anymore. We all know the story here, but I had him as the key when I was on. I think I was on with Duffer when Marty was out at the beginning of the season, preseason. He's like, who's the guy that brings it together? He chose Owen Power. I said, Jack Quinn. If you get Jack Quinn going, he scores 25, 30 goals. You're probably in a good spot. What's he at? 1 goal? One.
One empty
and
netter.
He's got as many games in the press box as he has goals this year. So that's kind of where I'm at with who needs to pick it up. Honestly, I'm not being a wise guy. I just think everybody's got to keep their foot on the gas, especially with the games coming up.
Well, and as we mentioned, when you're handing out game pucks, there's not a lot to go around, right? Luukkonen, Tuch has played well. Zucker, I think, has been, a nice addition to this group. Again, relative to what you expect and, how long the guy's been here, he is fit right in. He's providing some of that leadership. Tage Thompson is back to his top level when he's healthy, but, missed a good chunk of time here in this first 22 games. So when you have so few guys to hand out the absolute praise to that you can't poke a lot of holes in, brings you right to your point that you could point to almost anybody on the roster and say they need to get more. I see a few people in the chat mentioning Rasmus Dahlin, and
that they need more from.
Need more from Rasmus Dahlin.
I toyed with calling him out singularly, but not calling him out, but you know what I mean. He's your captain, the minutes, everything. I
$11
decided to
million
lean
a
into.
year, right? You know,
I decided to lean a little more into the timely discipline, and he is putting up points and all that. But you need more from everybody, including Dahlin. Most certainly.
It's an interesting year so far for the defensemen because they're piling up points, right? Part of the reason they're getting scoring, the scoring that they are is because of how good Dahlin, Power, and Byram have been. Power's been right near the top of the league in even strength points for defensemen. Byram's right behind him. Those guys are flipping the ice a lot. But what I want to see more really from all three of them is the consistency in their own end. This is what you're going to get from three still quite young defensemen. Power, obviously, younger than the other two, but bad penalties from Dahlin at bad moments in games. Some bad mistakes we saw early in the season that he started to clean up defensively. Byram's feels, like maybe just a little bit over aggressive at times,
Yes.
And I think, it's like what he's creating is costing him sometimes at the other end. And we've talked about Power just being the guy that needs to continue to physically mature and mentally mature, like develop that edge mentally that he's not going to get pushed around in front of the net. He's not going to lose battles. He finds ways to make impacts defensively, to be clear. Like, he does not need to deliver hits to be effective defensively. I think his reach and his instincts in the defensive zone, help him erase a lot of plays, but he does get out-muscled in key moments in puck battles and in front of the net. That needs to change for his game to reach the next level. So those guys are really like such a key foundation to the franchise, those three defensemen. Not a lot of teams have three defensemen, that highly drafted, that offensively skilled, but they need to put it all together, and still waiting for that to happen. I think that's why this is an average defensive team in some regards. They've gotten better defensive play from their forwards for the most part. Still looking for consistency there, but you're going to have an average defensive team when the offense you're creating is given some back, which I think is happening with these defensemen.
Like I mentioned a couple times already, short show today with the puck drop coming up here. We're about 38 minutes until it is the top of the hour. Matthew, chat time. Couple questions from the chat before we get you out of wherever you are right now in the arena. Anything that you have queued up? Boom.
Splendid says, I want to see Dahlin jump into the play even more. When he plays conservative, he's just an $11 million stay-at-home defenseman. I don't disagree with this. I don't have a problem with the aggressiveness from these guys, but it's finding a way for it to all fit together. The five pieces on the ice all need to be connected in those moments, and it feels like too often, maybe both defensemen are jumping in, or a forward's not getting back quick enough and not reading those guys quick enough. To Splendid's point, when Dahlin's being conservative, he's not. I mean, he says he's just an $11 million stay-at-home defenseman, and he's not even that, because he's not very good at that anyways, right? It kind of it takes away kind of what he is, and I think that's a good point on Splendid's part, that you want these guys playing that way, but eventually you do need to find the balance, and that's something it seems like they're still figuring out. I'm going to throw this up from Sun, unless you have some thoughts on that.
No, the only other it's kind of a Byram thought, because you're just talking about just in general the defenseman activating and going. With Byram, he's the guy that I want to do that more so perhaps than Dahlin, honestly. Well, I want them both to do it. With Byram, the reason I want to see him do it more is because there's like one brain fart a game with Byram that I just want to see him do it more, to just get it out of his system and eliminate those brain farts. Like he did it the other night against Minnesota. He's on the left side of the ice. He's got the blue line right in front of him. He's just got to gain the damn zone, and he's like pulls up and it puts everybody off sides. Little things like that. It was really appropriate when you were talking about it. It was like the last segment before you just started answering that question, but I wanted to get that thought out there. Get rid of that one brain fart a game and you got a really, really solid guy that could be a weapon, like more so than he is right now.
He was very close to being in the game puck bucket for me. Like I have been impressed by Byram on the whole, but yeah, to your point, there's been a few too many lapses, which is going to happen when you're playing. He's playing a ton of minutes also. He's logging a big workload, big role in the lineup, but he's about to become, I think, a really interesting player for the Sabres in the sense that he's in his RFA year. It's going to be an interesting contract for them. How many of those big contracts can you fit on that blue line?
Got a note here from Michael Pakala, who's listening to us right now on the I-90 in the car. So drive safe, Michael. I think the weather is going to get a little sketchy. Michael's down in the state of Ohio. He's near the PA border. But thought I'd give a shout out there to old Spike Pakala, longtime listener of the 50 episodes. He probably hasn't missed any of the 50. And if he has, I'll make sure he doesn't ever do that again. Yeah, go ahead with your next one. Sorry.
I'm going to toss this one to you because it sounds like you heard more of this than I did, maybe. But Son asked, can you please discuss Jeff Merrick's scary comments on an Oilers podcast? Very nerve-wracking stuff.
I think when you see how people are reacting to this on Twitter versus what was actually said, it's quite different. So Jeff Merrick, for those that aren't aware, was on an Oilers-based podcast, I believe, yesterday or maybe the day before. And the Oilers-based host asked Jeff about a team that could be a potential trade partner for the Oilers. And Jeff mentioned, he's wondering what's going on in Buffalo. A couple players that he mentioned, he called out Jack Quinn, obviously, that he's had a rough start to the season. Dylan Cousins is having a rough start to the season. He did mention that there's calls being made on Owen Power. And he did mention that Bowen Byram is a guy that, in Jeff Merrick's opinion, could absolutely murder the Sabres in arbitration. But when you look at what was said on social media, I think people were reading that as saying that there were definitely trade discussions going on with Kevyn Adams and who is it, Bowman, who's a GM in Edmonton now. And that wasn't said, at least on what I saw on that podcast. The takeaway, though, is that, look, I mean, we've already seen whether it was Elliot Friedman or Frank Saravalli or whoever saying that Kevyn Adams was having discussions, trying to make his team better. Didn't want to subtract, wants to add. If there is merit to it, like with Buffalo and Edmonton talking, I don't know who you're looking at from the Edmonton side. I just don't know. I'd love to learn more about that. But that's kind of like, I don't think that the alarm should go off in Buffalo that they're looking to trade Owen Power, that they're looking to necessarily deal Dylan Cousins right away. Hey, I've long said that every guy is open for discussion. But I didn't read anything into that appearance that Merrick made on the Edmonton podcast to suggest that anything's imminent or that Kevyn Adams is actively shopping some of these young players, regardless of how they've been going right now.
That makes a lot of sense to me based on the snippets I heard as well. I would just say that Kevyn Adams and the way he is approaching the early part of the season, there are going to be a lot of rumors flying because this is kind of how he operates in terms of checking in on everybody and exploring all the different possibilities. Also, given where the team is at, sort of hovering around playoff contention in a season in which they said it was win now mode. You have year 5 for Kevyn Adams. There's going to be general managers around the league that look at it and say, let's see how desperate he's feeling. Let's see how eager he is to shake up this roster. And they're going to make calls on some of these key young players that are under contract or try to see what's stapled down and what's not over in Buffalo, because there's a lot of attractive pieces here, even if guys haven't played perfectly, throughout the course of the season. So that's going to create probably some of these, interesting rumors that start going around. We'll see what happens. But I think with the cap space they have to do something eventually.
Rob Wise chimed in to my earlier comment about some of the left wingers potentially being a goal scorer today. I mentioned Benson and Zucker. Rob Wise also likes Benson and Zucker today to get on the goal sheet there, especially with the depleted right defense that Vancouver has. I think they're going with, what is it, Myers. They got Deharnay. I'm trying to think who else they have in there. They're missing, but they're pretty banged up. They're pretty banged up on that side of the ice. It could be an opportunity for those wingers to I don't want to say feast, but capitalize. We're getting close to quitting time, Matthew, but I think we got a couple more chats you want to get through, so go ahead.
Grumpy Scott says Kevin Adams needs to help this team. The coach and the players have held up their part. I would agree with this. They are in playoff contention. They are in playoff contention with the roster that was built. I don't think they have over or underachieved to this point. I think there are certain players who have underachieved and guys who you'd want more from. But on a team level, I think they're about where a lot of people expected them to be from a points per game standpoint, goal differential. There's not any major disparity, the red flag that you look at where this isn't sustainable or they're way overperforming their metrics and they're bound to fall back to earth. Like, they are a mushy middle team.
Yeah.
And I think when you're sitting on money, cap space, and assets, this is the time. If not now, then when? So it starts around this time, too, where big trades can happen. Teams start to realize post-Thanksgiving where they're at and, want to start to, do some things to shake it up. You're right. I think Grumpy Scott's right on the money that the players and Lindy Ruff have held up their end of the bargain and continue to. Soon it's going to be Kevin Adams' turn, and I think we're going to see something eventually. It would kind of shock me if we didn't. It's just a matter of how significant can it get, because as we discussed, if people missed our Kris Kreider discussion, that was on Tuesday's episode, there's always the no movement clause hurdle, that hoop to jump through. So that's going to be the case with a lot of big players that are out there. And how much will that limit the size of the splash that Kevin Adams is able to make at some point?
Well, that's why, I know that Buffalo, I don't think that they've been, Chris Johnson, I think, named some of the teams that are in on Jiricek with Columbus, and I didn't see Buffalo, at least in the ones that he listed, but it almost, if that's what it takes, I think you want a more veteran defenseman if you're going to add a defenseman to this team, but the no move clause could limit who is realistic, and it might put them in the hunt for a younger player. It's just more of the same, though, right? We talked about it last time. It's go out and get a guy that's been there, done that. But to your point, those no move clauses, I think, are going to be something that we're going to have to talk about with every single damn trade scenario when it comes up, and that's really unfortunate.
Yeah, and it's a caveat that people probably get sick of hearing about, but it's one that you have to mention in a league that increasingly hands those things out like they're candy, and they're 15 teams deep. Just where this team's been, that's what, they're going to be on a lot of those lists. But Jiricek, I'm warm into the idea because of exactly what you mentioned. He's not in that bucket of players who are, able to have a no move clause yet. And could he impact your lineup? I think absolutely, right? He could definitely, but you're going to have to deal with a lot of the similar conversations we're talking about with, some of these other young defensemen. Stylistically, though, he is a little bit different. Him and Power together, I mean, that'd be crazy. You'd have 4 top 6 picks on your blue line that eventually, you got to hope the cap really goes up, that this revenue really starts to go well. But Jiricek's got a heavy shot. He's a big dude. There's some untapped potential there for sure. What's motivating Columbus, though, to want to get out of that? It's a new GM who didn't pick him. I don't know. That's an interesting game. And to your point, sometimes you have to get a little bit creative. If some of the big fish, you only have a certain bucket of players that are available in season every year, right? And then of that group, how many of them are no move clauses that won't come to Buffalo? Sort of
not ideal, but it might be a necessity.
So you might have to get creative. You might have to do like what you did with Bo Byram, right? Go get a young player who doesn't have one of those. those guys can still help you, but it'll be interesting. There was a question here from John that we touched on a little bit. What's more important, a top 6 forward or a partner for power? And I kind of think it's the partner for power, pound for pound. We discussed this in the context of Kreider versus Trouba on Tuesday. We'd rather Kreider, right? So it's not it's situation by situation. And I think you can do both with the money and the assets that the Sabres have. But getting more consistency out of that second spot, second pair spot next to power. The fact that they were going with Jacob Bryson there for an extended period of time tells me they think that's a need too, because you wouldn't have Bryson in that spot. That's not where he belongs in an NHL lineup. So I think that sends up a bit of a signal that they think that's a problem area. And they did not put Samuelsson in the top 4 either to start the season. Not that he earned it, but also shows you maybe that they're thinking on him and where he fits in to an ideal construction of your top 6. So it still feels like a glaring hole in the lineup there next to power.
No, I think you're right on. The Bryson point is how you answer that question. 100%. I think I was changing. I was flip-flopping on how do you answer that question, but ultimately I think the way you framed it was perfectly done. So let's clear out what you have started and get you moving.
What else did I have here? I think that was it. That was my last star. And my point on the top 6 forward to round that out, and maybe we'll build our first trade board of the year next week and start to put together some of our targets. But the top 6 forward doesn't feel like it will be as necessary if Quinn and Cousins get going. It'll still be a nice piece to have, but with Kulich
and
Zucker playing the way they are, if Cousins and Quinn could just be what they're supposed to be, I think you can get by. But I don't see a real good answer in the top 4 on defense. I mean, I like Jokiharju enough, but they obviously don't, to have him out of the lineup as long as they did. So, but I'll be a little bit greedy and say both. Why does it have to be one or the other, right? Go get both. You got the money. Teams do it all the time. Maybe they're rentals. You can have it all. You can have it all.
There's a lot of money in that wallet to spend.
Theoretically.
There's a couple things that we'll wait to talk about next time we get together, and it won't be very long. We're going to keep a pretty regular rotation of this show here moving forward. Even when I do go back to work, which sucks. Maybe I just won't go back. Maybe I won't go back. The only other thing I was going to say before we go is I'm probably, and again, better than I, just being down there and around the team off the ice. Nico Kubel is still not seeing 100%. I'm thinking that he doesn't get in the lineup again today. I guess we'll find out. I don't know if you can see. You probably haven't looked. You've been looking at the chat and talking to the watchers and listeners of this podcast. So let's get that answered as well. I just wanted to get that thought out there since I jotted it down. Just he hasn't looked right. He's coming back.
It was a significant injury. He was playing with a brace, when he came back. So I think it was a knee sprain. The way he plays, that's hard. He's played with a brace before, he said, but still, that's a lot to deal with for a player that plays with speed and physicality, forechecks as hard as he does, changes direction. So I don't think it's a bad thing at all that he's, getting a few of these games, that they have the depth where he doesn't have to force his way back into the lineup. Not an easy injury to play through.
All right, Matthew, I'm going to take us out of here. Sabres Canucks coming up here in a little bit less than half an hour. You can find everything that Matthew Fairburn is working on over at theathletic.com Sabres. Check it out. I think there are going to be some holiday deals, like I mentioned last episode. There usually are at The Athletic, and I have a harder time finding better bang for your buck in terms of sports coverage out there. So that's Matthew Fairburn. I'm Kris Baker, production crew, whatever. Hopefully they're dodging snow. I got the blinds closed, but it looks like it was, you know what? My grass is covered, Matthew, which means your grass is covered. So
it's not good.
Not good, but hopefully done until tomorrow so we can get you home safely after the game. Enjoy the game. Everyone in the chat, also, thanks for stopping by. Enjoy the game. Like this video on your way out. Baker Fairburn Hockey Show. We will see you again next time.